Is Ruth Ben-Ghiat is an American history professor and political commentator. She is a scholar on fascism and authoritarian leaders. She is a professor of history and Italian studies at NYU, New York University. And I've known Ruth for a number of years professionally. She came on my podcast years ago, talk about this very topic during Trump won. I'm guessing it probably was while Trump was still president at that point. And unfortunately, Ruth's expertise is still highly relevant. Kind of reminds me of in graduate school, I did a lot of Soviet studies in the 1980s, and then it became irrelevant, and suddenly it became relevant again.
Yeah. Yep. And we're seeing people doing all kinds of salutes. I saw the Border Patrol official Gregory Bovino do some gestures that looked a lot like what Mussolini used to do. So we're back. We're there.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't even remember. I didn't see that one. I know of him. He's horrific. But I did not hear about that. Okay, let's start with that. We've got the weird Elon Musk thing with the hand in the air. I'm not even going to do it, but he did a salute that looked like what the Germans do in World War II. Are these things random? Are they truly just, oh, if you grab a video, you can always get my hand in some weird position? Or are these signals?
No, the purpose of them is they're done in different ways, carefully. They're like so that they're done so that they almost look like one, the classic one, and that's the point for the followers. They're speaking in code, but the point of doing these things is to normalize extremism, is to make it possible to see such salutes in their various forms in American life, on a stage, in Elon Musk's case, or just in the street. And that is a measure of the progress that extremism makes in public life. And it's always been like this. It's just happening now in our country.
Right. Let's be educational here. Define fascism and define authoritarianism.
Oh, is that all?
Well,
Okay,
we use the terms, but I
yeah.
think it'd be useful to
No,
have
it's
a
good.
definition of
It's
some
good.
kind.
So actually, one of the best definitions of fascism was given, not surprisingly, by its creator Mussolini, and he defined it as a revolution of reaction. So that is a very good definition, because you want to use violence. Fascists believe that you use violence to change history. They don't believe in reform. They don't believe in change through elections. They believe in revolutions and kind of upending everything, changing everything really fast. And this is true for communists, of course, too. But it's a revolution of reaction because what they're doing is turning the clock back. And for example, authoritarians have an appeal whenever there's been a lot of social progress in society. Maybe women get more rights, maybe there's more, so gender equity, racial emancipation, workers' rights. When you have a lot of change in society, up comes the revolution of reaction. And you can see MAGA as a kind of revolution of reaction. Breaking everything, disrupting everything to restore tradition. And it's often been white Christian tradition in the world.
What? So I'm looking at my little list here, also thing. Are we still a democracy?
We're becoming an authoritarian regime. We now, and this is very hard it's a hard question to answer, because it's important that people know that the way that authoritarianism works has changed in the 21st century. Because strictly speaking, authoritarianism is when the executive power, the executive branch kind of overwhelms, takes away the independence of the judiciary, the civil service has to be politicized, the military. But in the old school dictatorships, which still exist, North Korea and China, you've got a one-party state. There are no opposition parties, and there are no elections in the way we would define them. But there's in the 21st century, there's a lot of places, including even Putin's Russia, they have elections. They're just gamed. And Orban and Turkey, they have opposition parties. So it can be harder to say what is democracy and what is not. But there are certain metrics where we're very different than almost every other country in the world because we only have these two huge parties, and it's going to be much harder to just get rid of all of the Democratic Party, right? But we're already progressing where there's the weaponization of the justice system, there's the standardization of media talking points. There's a lot of things that we use to define authoritarianism have already happened in America. The leader cult, that's a really big thing, Trump's leader cult.
Well, tell me more about the leader cult. What is it and why does it matter?
So personality cults, again, they are left-wing, they are right-wing, communist, fascist. They are really one of the foundations of authoritarianism because basically, it's also called personalism, where the leader ends up making the state revolve around his own personal needs, his financial needs, his vendettas. We see that happening.
Right.
So he uses public office to make private profit for himself and his family. There's huge conflicts of interest. And so all of this, to kind of prop all of this up, there's the leader cult. And the more corrupt the leader gets, the more religious institutions, and we had Steve Bannon going on 60 Minutes saying that Trump is in office by he's an instrument of divine providence.
Right.
So that the leader cult, the leader is the man of the people, but he's also the man above all other men, the man everyone wants to be. And so again, he's the man of the people, he's at our level, but he's also untouchable. He's above everyone else. Indeed, he's in office by the will of God, supposedly.
And I'm guessing that this sort of cult of personality thing that Trump has created, right? That he's such a big figure and he's omnipotent and don't you dare question him and blah, blah, blah. Even the cute little hat, right? Everything I've said has been right or whatever the hat says,
Yeah.
right? It's cute, but it's also reinforcing this little bit of cultishness. I'm assuming Trump's cultishness is one, just personality issues, right? That he's an egomaniac, therefore you create a cult. Second, it's beneficial in creating sort of a mono leader, a unified one guy in charge of everything, crushing everybody else. Creating that. Well, I guess is he creating the cult? You're going to probably say yes to both. Is he creating the cult to help rally his supporters or to scare us, or both?
It's both. The leader cult, the reason it's like really at the center of everything is that it does many things. It allows him to, so for example, one of the foundations is that the leader must be untouchable by anyone. And so they have purges. If you fall out of favor and you're not sycophantic enough or not loyal enough, you get now in an old school dictatorship or even Putin's Russia, you fall out of a window, you're jailed. Here so far, it's been people primaried, or now they're going to be threatened with indictments. But the loyalty is important because the leader must be, his personality cult must be maintained so that he remains untouchable by the law, by anyone else. And that's why they don't like to talk about successors. You're not supposed to talk about anyone else who might be able to do your job. And so traditionally, they don't have successors. And if you start talking about being a successor, it won't be good for you.
Well, and it right there makes you sound like a lame duck, which for the foreigners out there is an expression we use for a politician that can no longer run for office again. So everybody knows they're only here for 2 more years and they become less powerful.
That's right. And I want to talk about this really interesting process that happens. I call it autocratic backfire. But the longer the leader stays in office and the more power he takes, the more he actually gets paranoid. And the more riches and people and money and power, they fear losing it, because the quote strongmen, my book is entitled Strongmen, but they're all weak and insecure. And that's why they're constantly doing purges. Anybody who's too competent, you get purged. And that's why we have people like Pete Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard, people who had no experience commensurate to what they're supposed to be doing. Because anybody who's too competent is a threat. And so they become more repressive and they purge more people because they feel more and more afraid that someone's going to supplant them or someone's going to take over.
You mean the more powerful he becomes, the more paranoid he becomes?
Yes.
Wait, is it
their cycle?
Lose, I guess, if you're more powerful, or no? There's just some weird dynamic going on.
They have more to lose. And also they know after a while they make so many enemies, even within the party, they keep purging people. Like, take an example, like Saddam Hussein famously purged the whole party. But right now, who's doing a lot of purging? Xi Jinping. He has fired 1/5 of his high military officials. And that is, yeah. And often autocrats will do a military purge before they have a big campaign, a big imperialist campaign, for example. So Hitler did the same thing, Mussolini did the same thing. But it also is it's a sign of weakness. And so the longer they're there, and that's why they end up in these bunkers. And they build these palaces, and they become very, very frightened. And so you have these cycles. Remember, in Stalinist Russia, the Great Terror came about, and nobody was safe. So the longer they're there, the more you have these purges. And it's a very interesting phenomenon.
What is just, lots of things disturbing, but what's disturbing about that is it sounds like things are going to get worse, not just, things are going to get worse in part because the more successful he is, the worse he's going to get.
Yes, and the other element of that is megalomania.
Right.
Where what autocrats do is they create these governance structures with sycophants and loyalists. And as you know, in order to be around Trump, you have to be a sycophant and telling him how great he is. And in fact, cabinet meetings they look like cabinet meetings in authoritarian states I've studied, where everybody has to go around and praise the leader. And
he's literally done that, folks.
Yes,
everyone went around the room and said, "Mr. Trump, this has been the most amazing." There's a Simpsons episode. I don't know if you ever saw it.
Yes.
Lisa Simpson, Mr. Burns runs for mayor or something, and he's trying to get Lisa Simpson at a dinner to say something good, and she reads the line and goes, "Mr. Burns, your campaign has had the momentum of a runaway train. Why are you so beloved?" or something like that. Every time I hear the Trump cabinet talk, it's the Simpsons.
Yeah, and somebody commented that some of those people are actually honest. They do admire President Trump, but and that's true. There are always people there who do admire the chief executive. But the point is, in an authoritarian environment like that, that chief executive goes out of his way to appoint only people who are super loyalists. And then what happens is they start to believe their own propaganda. And this is lethal for them because they're not getting any objective feedback. Like, think about CEOs or anybody in a management position, a position of authority. Good leadership means you have people around you who will tell you, give you objective feedback, right? You need that. We all need that. In academics, you've also got people critiquing you. You have to. And but autocrats can't stand that. And so after a while, they become megalomaniac and they believe that anything they do is right. And sometimes they get into trouble. They make disastrous decisions about wars, and then as happened to Mussolini and Hitler, they go under.
Okay. Funny you mentioned that, because you got me thinking of something. I think of Argentina. I don't want to get into sort of too many esoterics that folks may not be familiar with, but the military junta got into real trouble because they basically declared war on Great Britain and lost. In Greece, military junta, similar stuff. They played games in Cyprus, and it was the end of the junta because they screwed up and ended up losing a portion of Cyprus to the Turks. And they kind of helped cause it, the military government. And to what degree, I worry sometimes that we won't be able to defeat Trump unless he does something horrible. Because it's so outrageous, that even people in the middle finally stand up and go, oh no, this is just too far. But I don't know, I mean, is that the case? Or is that one possible scenario is that he finally I say too far, meaning Kent State. I don't mean just he's gone too far, obviously, in many ways. But is that one possible scenario, but also, and this can lead us to some positive discussion too, what are other ways of defeating an authoritarian?
Yeah, so one very unusual, what we're going through in the United States is unusual because of the speed of the changes. Just so people know, so we're ending year. It feels like year 10. It's month 10.
Actually,
10 months.
Because it was the end of January, I'd say 9 months. Yeah.
It's 9 months. Okay, you see, I'm not a math professor.
Yeah, even worse, it's only 9. Yeah.
Not a math professor. So these 9 months do not correspond to any other autocrats' first 9 months who came in by elections. The pace of change and devastation, the severity of what has gone on, if you put it all together, effects on rule of law at home, foreign policy, the economy, resembles more after a coup. So, yeah, you don't see this pace of change normally.
No, just let's put a finer point on it. When Ruth is saying after a coup, she means Trump is doing so much radical change. It's the kind of thing you see when a military dictatorship is in power, not a civilian wannabe dictatorship.
Or when somebody comes to power via legal election, like as Trump did. He came in by election versus coming in by a coup, which by definition is like, as somebody told me who lived through a coup, I left to go to school in the morning and we had a democracy. And when I came home, we had a dictatorship. So that's fast. Right. But the reason I'm talking about this is the things he's doing, especially now, he's not interested in reviving the government. The government is shut down. Millions of people are going to lose SNAP benefits. They're going to be in true hardship. This, I believe, is going to backfire. And it's all done so fast that people are already starting to wake up. We're having record numbers of people protesting. And eventually, even the people who are in the MAGA world, who have been conditioned by Trump for 10 years, really, of his propaganda, they are going to start waking up because the conditions of everyday life are going to get really hard, and it's going to be impossible to deny. And they're trying to blame it on the Democrats, but a new poll today said that 2-1 Americans are not buying this GOP blather that it's all Democrats' fault.
The shutdown, you mean, or what?
No, not just the shutdown, but also the threats to the refusal to end the shutdown, but also the threats to stop government assistance and food stamps and stuff like that.
Oh, interesting. Okay, good.
Yeah, it's just from today.
Good. Okay, well then that does play a little bit what I was saying, where he goes a little too far and all of a sudden people start, does it matter? So what if he goes too far and people start getting fed up with him? That's the whole point, is he seems to be creating a system. First of all, he didn't even need to create a system. Who knew our system could facilitate basically fascism? I mean, who knew, or authoritarianism? Who knew our system was built in a way that you could just do whatever the hell you want, even if it's illegal, and it's kind of hard to stop you. I forgot sort of what I was going to go with that. Well, actually, maybe just start with that. I think a lot of us are kind of, especially forget the foreigners, about a third of our audience is from abroad. And the Canadians especially are always going, what the hell is going on with you people?
I know.
And I'll tell you, it was kind of funny. One of our folks the other day said during my live, and they said, you've got to understand, this is our first dictatorship. Which I thought was a great way of putting it, because they were like, we're not used to dealing with this. And even myself, I've done a ton of political activism over the years, going after my government, going after foreign governments. I've never had to deal with this. This is a whole lot, and I've never had to worry about my safety, and now I do. Whether my safety is not Charlie Kirk, but my safety is more that Trump would come after me, that they would sue me or something just to try to bankrupt me. The Biden people, the Bush people, none of them would have ever sued me. I mean, I went after Dick Cheney and his daughter. I'm the reason the world knows Mary Cheney is gay, Dick Cheney's daughter, quite literally. And they would never have gone after me. These guys, of course they would.
Yeah, and I was supposed last fall, right before the election, I was supposed to deliver the Bancroft Lecture at the U.S. Naval Academy. It's a huge honor.
Right.
It's been going on for decades, this Bancroft Lecture, and I was going to do it on Pinochet and what happens when militaries, cave to authoritarians.
Tell people who Pinochet is or was.
The Chilean military dictator, came in by a U.S.-backed coup in 1973 and stayed 17 years. Terrible, bloody dictatorship, tortures, imprisonments, all U.S.-backed until the U.S. got sick of him, and then they helped the opposition, and that was a success. He's one of the only dictators who left after he was voted out. Actually, it's very rare. But I was going to talk about him.
About him to the Naval Academy, was it? You said?
Yeah, okay. To the Naval Academy, and I think that they already, MAGA people already knew that what they wanted to do with the military if Trump was reelected. And 20 members of Congress, GOP members of Congress, organized and wrote a congressional letter so that I would be banned from speaking, and they threatened it would be a violation of the Hatch Act.
Well, this is before the election?
Yes, right before.
Did Biden cave?
It was the U.S. Naval Academy that caved.
Wow.
But I mention it because they were playing already a different kind of game, which I recognized as an authoritarian style game. And as it turned out, look what's happening now. We have military in the streets, and they are following part of the junta playbook. Now they want these rapid response units. And so every day I see the news about the military, I think, yeah, no wonder they didn't want me to talk about like coups and corruption and how militaries lose their mission and the morale when they have a dictator.
Well, and you have to wonder at the notion that Republicans before the election last year felt that a criticism of military dictatorships was anti-Republican.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about the National Guard stuff. The Trump administration has federalized a lot of National Guards around the country, sent them and other officials dressed very military style. Even the Border Patrol and ICE and others, immigration, have been dressed as sort of a violent military look, or possibly historical look as well to others in history. And besides just, and let's just do a given. Obviously, not great for immigrants who are here, what they're doing. But let's extrapolate a little larger. Is this, it's scary to me as an American that I see this, but is it actually scary beyond just for immigrants, or is there something larger going on that's dangerous in terms of what Trump is doing with this National Guard stuff? And not just National Guard. Let's put Border Patrol and ICE, because they're two sides of the same coin, little different sides. Maybe National Guard's even more serious in some ways, but they've militarized immigration, and thank you for the gifts. They've militarized immigration and Border Patrol at the same time.
Yeah, it's terrifying. And what they've been doing is, Border Patrol during Trump 1.0 already had a kind of lawless culture. But this is where, Hegseth said, your hands will be untied. And Stephen Miller tells other law enforcement, you're unleashed now. And we all know what that means. And also talking about how the military doesn't need to have old-fashioned rules of engagement. And what that means is rules of engagement that are about checks on not committing war crimes. So and just as we see the attacks on the rule of law, we also see attempts to have a kind of lawless ethos and a brutal ethos. And you see it in the way they're dressed and the masks. Everything is designed to terrorize people. That's why they have the anonymity. And the mask is very interesting because it protects their anonymity, but it also empowers the mask wearer. I have studied this from fascism. They didn't wear masks. Putin's secret police wear masks, but the whole point is to empower people to believe that they have impunity and that they can do anything they want. They can be lawless and brutal. They can throw grandmothers to the ground. They can, do things that we see them doing every day. They're doing them because a culture has been created in government that is telling them that it's okay to do those things, that they won't pay any penalty.
Wow.
That's why I'm terrified.
I never kind of thought, I mean, I've always, certainly if somebody feels anonymous, they feel more empowered, but it makes me wonder if it's not just anonymous. I was watching some actors the other day interviewed, and they were talking about it taking them, 8 hours to put on it was actually Star Trek stuff, I think. I'm a little geeky that way. And they were talking about it taking 8 hours to put on the makeup, but how once they had this makeup as a different creature, the actor was talking about how it totally changed him. How the makeup itself and the garb and the look and feel was itself empowering rather than just trying to get in the headspace of whatever he was becoming. And I never thought of it as I thought of the masks as being, they hide themselves and they might feel a little safer, but not the mask itself was almost creating some other creature.
It's the whole, and they've also, ICE has been allowed to kind of personalize their attire and show their tattoos and look as ferocious as possible. And that is empowering to the individual members of ICE. It's part of their ethos as a unit. Of their little units as they go out and they do these things. Unfortunately, the reason I understand this so well is the way that fascism started in Italy. Everybody talks about Nazism, but fascism was there like a decade before, and Hitler learned from Mussolini. And they would go out in these small bands with trucks and beat people up. And so the truck would arrive, a big military style truck would arrive, and they would beat everybody up, and they had special clubs there was a whole ritual. They called them the saintly clubs, Manganello, and they felt empowered being together, and also because they had the black shirt on. So I've thought about this for many years, and you can imagine like seeing it in my own country. It's not, of course, the same exactly, but the things we're talking about, how group identities can be formed that are conducive to violence, that's definitely going on now.
We can, and I'm going to probably get into some of the negative stuff still as we go on, but since we're like halfway through, and if you want to go over, feel free. You depend on your schedule. Somebody just asked, what do we do about it? I'm going to ask that, but I guess part of my question is, are we letting this happen?
No, I don't think we're
doing something we're not doing, because I don't know what to do. I mean, I don't want to admit to people, but I myself, who have been involved in politics for 40 years and done a lot of activism, feel somewhat stymied here.
No, well, we're all shell-shocked, and that's the point. That's why I talked about how fast it's been. Now, ICE, and I have stuff on ICE and Border Patrol in Strongmen, which was written during Trump 1.0. And I have a whole bunch of stuff about how, immigrants are afraid to open their door. Yeah, they were afraid to open their door.
So, Strongmen, is that one of your books, Strongmen?
Yeah, that's my book where I taught, and Trump is in it.
Okay. Trump 1.0. People know to go look for it. I thought that's what you were referencing. Yes. Right.
Yes, and it became a New York Times bestseller in 2024 because all the things started to seem more relevant, sadly. But what were you saying about are we bringing this on ourselves? No, and one of the
ourselves in the sense of, should we be doing something we're not doing, because I don't know what the hell to do.
Well, but what's truly astounding in a wonderful way, and one of my maxims is never underestimate the American people. I'm a first generation American, very proud of that. And every time ICE arrives in a neighborhood, what do you see? You see ordinary people. Some of them are going to work, some of them are in their pajama pants with no shoes on, and they see people being targeted. And what do? They come out of their homes and they defend those people.
Yeah.
And you see this, again, people, all kinds of people dressed every which way. And this is happening over and over again. And the numbers of people doing this are getting bigger.
Well, I was saying, like, I was talking during my shows. We've seen videos of Black people stepping up. We've seen videos of Latinos stepping up, which is very interesting because you'd think Latinos would be a little terrified right now. We just this weekend saw videos of well-to-do white Chicagoans stepping up and screaming at these guys. And I've been so impressed and proud and a little surprised that you've got these sort of demographics, poor, rich, white, Black, Latino. Everybody's starting to get pissed off enough that they're risking getting arrested to stand up to these guys.
They're risking getting arrested, and they're also risking getting thrown to the ground and getting a concussion or worse. And they're still doing it. So when I'm based in New York City, when they came to Chinatown, some of the video footage, there was a woman who clearly had, like, leaving work or something. So she had like a beautiful work outfit on, and she had a big designer purse. And she got in front of one of the ICE vehicles, and she raised both her hands and gave the finger, and her designer purse was swinging. And I thought, this is just perfect, right? Because it's truly cross-class, it's multiracial, cross-generational, and this is a very good sign. So that's not all we need to do, but that's very important that this is happening.
Why is it important? Devil's advocate, who cares if some people go on the street and yell at ICE guys and call them NZs? It doesn't change anything. Trump is still moving ahead. The ICE are still arresting Latinos, and they're still tear gassing children's Halloween parade in Chicago. Why does it? No kings. 8 million people turned out. That's nice. Does it matter? They didn't do anything. A devil's advocate, of course.
Of course, it's good to do that. It matters hugely because every time this is how famous protest and resistance movements that eventually have gotten rid of authoritarians are built. And that every time people see someone doing this, they are inspired, maybe not this time, but maybe next time, to come and join them. And there's many, many ways we can also use our power as consumers and do boycotts. We've seen that was very effective. But it is very important for people to see ordinary people coming out spontaneously, because No Kings, it was a huge success. And I also want to just tell people that no country ever constructed a major pro-democracy mass movement in just a few months, especially not one the size of America and the complexity of America. So we're doing pretty well. It's just that they're throwing everything at us with the speed of light. And so it can seem like we're doing all this stuff and nothing has changed yet. But that's not really realistic, but we can't give up. We're just at the beginning.
Interesting. So you said that not only has Trump sort of advanced this fascist agenda, whatever that word we use, at an unprecedented rate compared to other countries that have descended into this sort of authoritarianism, but the opposition has organized, like the No Kings rallies, in an unprecedented, rapidly way as well, which is actually good news.
Yeah, and because what matters is that each protest is bigger than the last. Now, we have
Why do they matter? We sort of didn't get to that. That's nice people turn out, devil's advocate, but so what? He's still in power and he still tore down the White House and he's still sending the National Guard to the next city. We can go on the street and say, hello, please stop. We have a funny outfit and a funny sign, but in the end, he's still solidifying dictatorship. And
yeah, but
so
but you could think about the mass protests that we see in long established dictatorships. You could ask the same thing of that. People are out there in Belarus. What about in Iran? The women who came out in Iran, like thousands and thousands of women who took off their head covering and cut their hair. I mean, this is very important, to slowly creating a climate for something different. And the more ordinary people of all types who come out, the more it's going to open up the eyes of voters, of people. Now, and some people will say, well, we're not going to have elections, but that's a very, like, don't go down that road, because then you really are doing it to yourself. We can never give up on voting. It's the bedrock of democracy. And the more people who are out there in different ways, spontaneous or organized, the more others will join them, and then it will be impossible to ignore, despite Fox News refusing to show any footage of it, or just labeling it as Antifa, because people will start to know people who are protesting, and they'll know that those people are not Antifa or terrorists. And
it sounds like coming out gay or trans to some degree. Like one of the big successes we had in the gay rights movement was, and we always said, come out. People get to know you, and all of a sudden,
that's it.
It starts to be your brother and your friend and your coworker. And even if you start to say, well, I know some good ones, at least you know some good ones now. You realize not everybody is X, Y, and Z that the bad guys keep saying.
That's very important. You verbalize that perfectly, and that's why, as these movements grow, even people who have been brainwashed, I don't like to use that word, but I'm using it anyway. People who have been totally, they're not tethered to reality anymore. They're totally in the world of propaganda. They start having doubts because they know that their neighbor is not actually an Antifa terrorist, or the person they go to church with. So yes, be out there. That's important.
So that's part of, or that's a good argument for why it's not just important to be part of the protest, but to simply stand up and say no on Facebook, on social media. Say no, I disagree. I think what he's doing is horrible. Or like you said, I'm Antifa too, or whatever. But to sort of just give that testimonial perhaps sows doubt in some of the minds of some of the true believers.
Yeah, and I want to say, not everybody wants to go into the streets, or they can't, for physical reasons or whatever, right, or childcare reasons. And there are many ways that you can protest. Again, I mentioned doing boycotts. You can phone bank. There are things you can do from home. But if we all do something that we're suited to do in our own way, over time, a movement is created, and there is an impact.
What's the ultimate goal here? This isn't Nepal. I don't even want to go into the detail. People keep talking about Nepal in the comments. Not here. I'm talking about videos, and I'm like, la, la, la. Nepal got violent, basically. But they may have succeeded, though, but they got violent. That's not our goal at this point. So what is our goal? What are we trying to achieve?
Very good question. We're trying to achieve, I think that we need, just as we had a record-breaking protest, peaceful protest, we need to break records with voting, because we all know all the tricks that already have historically been played in our, we've had a very flawed democracy because of racialized voter suppression and other kinds of voter suppression. And we need an unprecedented turnout for voting that is beyond anything ever before, in order to compensate, and they can deny it, but we have to do that. So that's one thing, and it's hard to say. This is why I brought up, Belarus and even China had lockdown protests, and 97 universities in China. You could say there, like, why are they doing that? They've got a one-party state. She isn't going anywhere. But if we thought that way, then we would never have any change ever. So it's really important to value peaceful protest without having to have an endpoint already. And if it doesn't meet this endpoint right now, then it's useless. That's not the way that history works.
Sometimes I feel like we don't have the vocabulary to describe what's going on or what Trump is. I think it's in large part because as I joked at the beginning, one of our followers said the other day, this is our first dictatorship. As Americans, we're not used to dealing with this. We don't have political language for it. I will say the left, maybe the far left, whatever, used to use the word fascism to mean kind of any Republican was a fascist. And I today, when I call Trump a fascist, a part of me feels silly using that word because I feel like I'm using, kumbaya, lefty, hippie language or something. And the word fascism doesn't even resonate. The only words that resonate in America are communism and socialism. Those words resonate left and right in the American psychology because we're so terrified of them and we associate it with the Soviet Union and all this kind of stuff. But we don't have words, even authoritarianism. It's a little bit scholarly to use that word. What is Trump and his movement? A, as a scholar, is it fascist? And B, what word should we be using to describe him that people will go, okay, you're right, I don't like that word. Meaning that's somebody I would not want to be associated with. But I feel like fascist is a bit, I don't know. Like I said,
it's hard to know because there are huge resonances in what's going on now with fascism. I mean, I've been studying fascism for like 20 years, so I can tell you it's there.
Okay.
But it's not, it's actually doesn't capture the full experience of Trump, because Trump, if you think about who the kinds of leaders that he admires, yes, Putin, and Putin could be called a kind of, post-communist fascist, but Xi Jinping, and he's into Kim Jong-un, those are communists. So what really, the reason I use authoritarian more than fascism was a stage of authoritarianism, like communism, because at the end, these people don't have any principles. It's just about power and repression and stealing. And so Trump is equally admiring of right-wing and of communist leaders. Right. That's the real truth. Right. And he's doing many things that scholars of communism are looking at and finding familiar. Not the economy, but also the pace of change. There are people who study Mao. Scholars have studied Mao for years. And of course, it's not Mao with the Cultural Revolution, but they are looking at the speed and they're like, hey, this is kind of reminding me. So that's for that reason only, fascism doesn't capture the full picture, which is saying a lot, right? Because it is fascist, but it's also more. No wonder we don't have the words to describe it.
Well, it's funny because I have, as somebody who is relatively intelligent and educated and graduate degree in international affairs, blah, blah, blah. But I have used, when talking about these things, I've said it is communist, it is fascist. And then I sort of correct myself and say, I know what those are. I know they're usually opposites. That's not the point. They are, my expertise is much more the Soviet Union and that kind of stuff than fascism. But it absolutely is hearkening to certainly my expertise with that. I don't know World War II as much, but there are certainly things that scare me in terms of the demonization of minorities. I mean, talking about trans people, a couple months ago we found out that, forget the demonization overall of trans people, which is its own kind of fascist thing going on, but they said they were looking into, the Trump people, declaring transgender people overall to be mentally ill, like all of them, and use it to take away their right to gun ownership, which, however you feel about guns, it's a constitutional right that they're going to take away from an entire class of Americans because they've declared you mentally ill. And I'm going, to me, that feels like Germany. It doesn't even feel Soviet Union. That feels German to me.
Yeah, if you look in my book Strongmen, I talked about which groups over a century are persecuted over and over again. And it's nomadic peoples. If it's Europe, it's non-whites, non-Christians, but it's LGBTQ people. And the through line, the one group that is persecuted by everybody is LGBTQ, and today trans people.
Interesting.
And because there are even some dictatorships.
I mean, I would say Jews are probably pretty high up on the list too, consistently, I would think. No?
Yeah, and Muslims. So,
Oh, interesting.
but
Okay, that's interesting.
depends where it's located.
Right.
But the group that is always persecuted,
LGBT, that's
because
interesting.
some dictatorships have, like, most of them go after women too, try and control their bodies, take away reproductive rights, but not all of them. And some of them give women rights, more rights than they had, more assistance, but they never support, quite the opposite, LGBTQ people, and declaring people mentally ill. So the Soviets used to lock up dissidents in psychiatric institutions
Oh
because if you
yeah.
don't believe the propaganda, you got to be crazy.
Yeah.
And so this business of trying to link LGBTQ people, trans people in particular, and the specter of uh, putting them in institutions is very frightening.
How does it help Trump's movement and solidifying power? For example, the demonization of trans people. He's not just doing it for fun. It's part of a strategy. What's the strategy there?
So
Well, historically,
just
sorry, but real quick, you talked about how historically so many of these movements, whether it was the
yeah.
Germans, whether it's the Soviets or Chinese even, demonizing this sort of, demonizing these groups of the population. What's the goal there?
So the one of the reasons that the Nazi campaign against the Jews, the genocide, succeeded is that most Germans didn't know Jews. Jews were like 1.1% of the population. So often you pick somebody. This goes back to our point about knowing people, and then it becomes harder to believe the propaganda about them. So they pick a group who hardly anybody knows because they're very small
Right.
in society, and trans people fit this. They fit this category. A lot of people don't know. They may know somebody who's gay, but they may
Right.
not know someone who's trans. It's very rare, if you look at the statistics in
Right.
society, and so they're a perfect target. And then the fascist authoritarian mentality is all about hierarchies and keeping things that are different apart and using violence to deal with people who are different.
Right.
And so trans people check a lot of those boxes for the end of civilization itself.
Okay, but do they perceive trans people as an actual threat or are they using them as a gimmick?
Some perceive them as an actual threat. Also, you have to factor in the like natalist politics, trying to have population engineering, and so they, even though you can adopt, you can have babies, they see them as wrecking the family,
Right. Like
and
gay.
all gay people
Yeah.
wrecking the
Yeah.
family. So
Right.
that has to be factored in too.
And there is, I would say, because I mean, I've done a lot of LGBT activism, but certainly no gay better. That has always been a line of attack, and a lot of them believe it. They actually believe, you know,
Yeah,
you're actually something I read recently. They were saying it. I'm forgetting who was saying it again about the whole. Oh, that was the Russians, of course. The whole idea. It's part of the Western plan to turn everybody gay, and they stop having
that's right.
babies, and they destroy the population. So there is an actual concern there. But I also feel like on the trans front, Trump doesn't care. Trump is doing it because he sees it as somehow beneficial to his consolidation of power to have this particular. And I actually, you know what? It's not just this particular enemy. He's using trans people to brand the rest of us as extremists and out of touch. He's
Yeah,
ironically calling them an enemy to make sure he brands me and you an enemy because
yeah.
we're the ones who support those people.
Yeah, that's right. That's very insightful. Because ultimately, these strongman types, they don't care about anyone or anything but themselves and getting rich and keeping more power. So everything they do is just for those reasons, for political reasons, strategy reasons. And it's also why you see the autocrats turn on each other. Look at the Hitler-Stalin pact. It was a nice alliance, and then Hitler invaded Stalin. You see that the history is full of these things
Right.
because they don't have any principles.
Or every cabinet secretary that ever worked for Trump, and I'm actually not being facetious. Most of
Yeah,
them, no. Having that's a little different probably because I think a lot of them worked for him and went, "Wow, this guy's crazy."
yeah, yeah. Because and the reason they're so mercurial and they're changing all the time, their policies, and you can't keep up with them, and people say they're crazy, is because they don't have any principles. they're totally transactional with their countries and with each other. So they're very dangerous for that reason. It's really unfortunate that we have our own representative of this tribe of leaders.
Let me ask you a question. It's kind of two questions in one. How dangerous is this, what's going on right now? And how bad can this get? I mean, how bad can this get in America? Not in the world. Things have gotten really bad sometimes, but
I mean, we could become a kind of militarized society, like a kind of, in Brazil, they had a junta that was a civilian military dictatorship. The power was shared by civilian and military. We could end up with that kind of thing. The way that they're empowering ICE is going to have a budget that's more than the entire armed forces of major nations like Brazil. And ICE is buying chemical weapons and explosives. Like, why?
right.
So that's not a good sign. So we definitely seem to be going down the road of some kind of militarized rule. And more and more people could be rounded up and imprisoned. There'll also could be a lot of hardship because they don't really care what happens to the population. But I also believe, to be positive,
Right.
and I've in February, I just had this whole vision of what could happen, and I wrote a piece. I have a Substack called Lucid, as in like think clearly,
How do
lucid.
people find? Yeah, I was saying. How do people find your Substack?
It's substack.lucid.com or lucid.substack.com. And I write about all this stuff there. But in February, I wrote a piece that's called Out of the Chaos and Corruption, A Reckoning Will Come. And I just saw very clearly that it was going to be so extreme and so fast, and so many bad things would happen, that people would start opening their eyes and rising up. And now, the naysayer, as you've been part of the time, would say, well, so what if people rise up? Is that going to actually get rid of anything? But the rising up is important. And it's already started, actually, as we've talked about. So I think we could come out of this nightmare a stronger democracy with a real understanding, some of people for the first time, what it means to have rights, and what the stakes are of voting, because too many of people don't vote, and what it means to have good governance versus governance. A leader that makes an AI video where he's dumping excrement all over people, that's not good governance.
I'm going to hit you with, well, I'm going to say two final questions because I want to make sure I get them in. And if you've got more time, feel free to stay. Let's put it that way, because I want to. We agreed to an hour, but I'm happy to keep going. You let me know how time is going. But let's I guess the last two questions, but then again we can sort of open this up. Is what should people do? I mean, again, coming back to what can I do? People are saying, what do I do? What should people do if they want to make a difference, if they want to fight back, if they want to stop him? And let's assume Democrats and normal Republicans, if the movement exists anymore, are able to take back Congress and the White House. What should they do legislatively or whatever to put guardrails in place so this doesn't happen again? Or is there nothing we can do because it's more of a cultural thing? So let's go back first to what should regular people do watching the show today if they want to get involved and help stop this? And maybe people like me who also have a voice, what should I be doing?
Yeah, so I mean, we partly talked about this before. Everybody can do, there's room for everyone to do something. You can register people to vote, you can join protests, but it's also important to, so dictatorships have these, what's called authoritarian bargains with elites. And these elites, they're financial elites, media elites, religious elites, they prop up they cave to them, they capitulate, and they have these bargains with them. So the reason that boycotts were really good is that they went after all the corporations and companies that were that were, complicit in the silencing of people. And so using your power as consumers is really important. I also think, and it's not just me, a lot of people study these things, it's time to have those perhaps unpleasant conversations with people in your family or your friends who are in the MAGA cult or in some extreme form of Christian nationalism, the holy war people, and try and talk to them. And my mother was radicalized in England by watching Russia Today, and I would send her pieces that I wrote in CNN, and she would say, like, "You're fake news." And so I would hang up on her. Yeah. And then I realized, why am I hanging up? That's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to try and keep the dialogue going. So it can be very, a lot of people don't want to do that. But it's really important to do. And as things get worse in this country, like we talked about before, as everyday life becomes harder, and I think that people will be more receptive to thinking about that this is not all the Democrats are not the enemy. And Trump is not the infallible hero of America. So that's something that everybody can do as well. So joining peaceful protests, boycotts, supporting a general strike if it comes to that, so that kind of economic tools, labor tools, having conversations, all kinds of things. There's all kinds of things that you can do, phone banking. And I think supporting people who are speaking out is really important, because it's difficult to speak out, and there are risks involved. And people need to hear from you, and that encourages them to do it again.
Right. And let's assume Democrats and good Republicans are able to take back our government. What guardrails do we put in place? Are they legislative or what? And maybe legislation isn't exactly your expertise, I don't know. But what do we do to make sure this doesn't happen again?
Yeah, there would be a whole suite of things to do, and it isn't my expertise, but the thing about authoritarians is they come to power, and this has been true for 100 years, and they are expert at finding the loopholes in democratic institutions and using them against the system, right? So one example, and many people are against the Electoral College because it's elitist, and it is. I, as a scholar of autocracy, because I studied global autocracy, and I wasn't an expert in America, so I kind of take that view and I look at American institutions. When I start thinking about the Electoral College, and then the thing that happened with Mike Pence, and after in 2020, right. I thought, oh, well, anytime you give just a few people so much power to decide an election or to certify results, right. You are making those people very vulnerable. So that's another reason it's vulnerable to manipulation by bad actors. Okay. And that's another reason that Electoral College, besides its elitism, I think that's something that should be reformed.
Well, I'm sorry, which are you saying? Electoral College is therefore a problem, or Electoral College helps protect us a little bit?
No, it's a problem.
Oh, okay.
And then another thing, we have much more time between the end of the election and the inauguration of the president. We have many months. Most countries have just a few weeks or much shorter. And that's because
overnight, literally, which is amazing. The next morning after an election, they got a new prime minister. But that blew my mind.
And the reason is too many. I think about what could a bad actor do. Well, we saw. Trump had plenty of time to try and overturn the election. He tried everything. He had months. So that's another thing.
That's interesting.
That was last. I think it used to be even longer, and then it might have been in 1933. Again, that's not my field. It was shortened, but it's still
I remember
way
it
too
used
long.
to be March that the new president, I believe, and I don't remember. It was maybe the farm season or something crazy that they moved it to January, which of course is nuts too because it's freezing. But so it used to be like 6 months wait.
So those are two examples.
Oh, that's funny. That's
of
interesting.
structural things.
Actually, let me put a finer point on it. Ruth is talking about our election is early November, let's say November 4th. The new president is not sworn in until January 20th, which is 2.5 months later. She's saying you're giving people opportunities to have an insurrection. You're giving Trump an opportunity to talk for 2.5 months about how everything was stolen and crazy. Whereas if the new person took over almost immediately, it'd become moot. And it's like, well, what do you do? Biden's president, nothing we can do about it.
Yeah. And then we can look at how Brazil has handled, the Bolsonaro copycat insurrection, and he's been convicted.
You want to
And
tell
so,
people what that is really quick? Because I'm up on it, but they may not be. What's the issue there?
yeah, if someone tries to overthrow the government by staging an insurrection, um, they need to be prosecuted and held accountable. And a lot of political science studies show that if you want to look at what is most damaging to democracy, it's when you don't hold criminals accountable.
And
That's
in Brazil, that
devastating.
happened. The former president lost the election, had a plot. He was convicted of having a plot to kill the guy who won and was going to take over the government again. He was charged, he was convicted, and the reason you're paying more for coffee in part is because Trump put a 50% tariff on Brazil to punish them for convicting the former president for an insurrection.
Yeah, he's very upset about that. And the advisors for Bolsonaro to tell him how to do this in the spirit of January 6th were Steve Bannon and Jason Miller. So there's a U.S. connection, and he was held accountable. The same in South Korea, where the head of state tried to have martial law, and very quickly was prevented from doing that, and then was held accountable. So we have those alternate realities where democracy is protected, and that didn't happen here, and that has to be a learning experience.
Are you optimistic?
Yeah, I am.
Why?
Because I believe, again, I believe in the American people. I believe in the power of people who decide that they that that this just isn't right. It isn't right to have what's going on now in our neighborhoods, and so it has been around the world, and in much more dire circumstances of one-party states, people have still come out, and eventually they have made a difference.
Well, what does make a difference? I mean, you've talked about people stepping out, but I mean, how, and maybe we can extrapolate a little for the US, how is it in dictatorships that people are somehow able to overthrow the government? I mean, Eastern Europe went for 45 years, then all of a sudden it exploded. What is it that triggers people to stand up? But also in Iran, they try to stand up repeatedly and they keep getting crushed. What makes it finally successful when you stand up and protest that all of a sudden the government changes, for example?
So this will be my last answer because I have to go
No
after
problem,
this.
thank you.
But autocrats like us to think that they're so efficient and they're so strong, but in reality, most of these regimes are so corrupt that they're crumbling from within, and they're causing impoverishment. Of course, they're being repressive, but some people don't mind repression if it's other people. But ultimately, most of them are stealing from people, and so it can get to a point where the system isn't really working, and nobody believes the propaganda anymore. And that's when state security forces can start refusing to fire on protesters, or they can desert. That happened in Syria with Assad. The soldiers just decided they weren't going to fight for him anymore, and they left. And that is how it fell. So the rule is it's slowly and then suddenly. It's like crumbling behind the scenes, and everybody knows, but they can't say because they'll be arrested. But it is actually crumbling and rotting, and then it goes.
Which means keep fighting. And actually, Assad's a perfect way to end this because, right, none of us thought he could get overthrown, and all of a sudden, boom, he was overthrown, and it was like, what?
That's it.
You know?
That's why everything counts, and we have to have hope, and not just like it sounds like, oh, hope, but every dissident who survived a long regime will tell you you have to have hope, because hope is the idea that there can be a different future, and that your actions really will matter if we all band together. So yeah,
Okay,
end
great.
on that happy note.
Very good. So Ruth Ben-Ghiat, a fascism authoritarian expert. I just Googled, it's lucid.substack.com is Ruth's Substack newsletter. So go check a webpage newsletter. So go check it out. Are you well, you're here on TikTok. They know where you are because you can click on Ruth's name, hopefully, and find her TikTok. Any other social media that you're pretty active on you want to tell folks?
Yeah, Instagram, it's at Ruth Ben-Ghiat. I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on X.
Same thing.
And
Ruth Ben-Ghiat, one name, one word.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah.
No hyphen for the actual at, I'm assuming?
No hyphen. And you can pick up my book, Strongmen, which is a century. It goes from Mussolini, and Trump is in it, and Putin, and it's the tactics, corruption, violence, machismo. We didn't talk too much about gender, but
I had it on my list and forgot, but I was going to ask you about that because okay, 10-second answer. Is it always men? Are the strong men always men?
Well, today sometimes they're like Meloni, but it has been, yes.
Yeah, and she's quasi. I almost feel like I'm liking her on Ukraine, but yeah.
We'll have to have another conversation about that.
Actually, that would be
Let's have another conversation about gender.
Yeah. Oh no, let's absolutely. All right, Ruth, thank you so much, guys. I'm going to hang a little bit. Ruth, if you can figure out how to disconnect, do it. It's not easy.
All right, I will try. And if you see me here, it's me.
Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Okay, bye.
Bye.